Bueno, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for sharing this conference with us. Another luxury panel that we have here at Bilbao 2021. We're here today with Natalia Chueca Muñoz. She's a councillor of public services and mobility for Zaragoza City Council, and she will probably share with us many of the interesting matters that Zaragoza is carrying out with regard to the topic that brings us here today, which is new technologies for urban mobility. And then Milagros Tolón, who is the mayor of Toledo, also from a perspective of how public policies accompany this transition to move from sustainable urban mobility, which puts people at the center, the citizens of our cities. We will continue with John Leque Martinez, the chairman of the Association of Car Dealerships in Vizcaya and a partner director general at Autonervión. Also from the perspective of car dealerships linked to cars, their perspective, also linked to what new technologies mean for them and the effect it has on sustainable development for taking care of the environment and, in short, to improve our quality of life as citizens. And finally, we have the chairman and CEO of Capsh Traffic Com for Spain and Portugal, Mr. Javier Aguirre, who since 2013 has this position as the chairman, and without a doubt, this is a company which today is participating, and we were talking earlier on about its participation in some programs in Argentina, which is where I'm from, and participating in this activity where he's been visiting us these days. So welcome to you all. We trust that this will be offer a new perspective here at Sun Bilbao, which appeals to us to change the paradigm linked to mobility in our cities and our citizens. So without further ado, I invite you, Natalia, to make your presentation. Thank you very much. Hello, good afternoon. I'm going to remove my mask, if you don't mind. Well, first of all, I wanted to start by thanking the Bilbao City Council and Alfonso Gil for organizing this SUM Bio 2021, which is a great opportunity to talk about mobility and to all meet each other. And also thank you for inviting me to participate and to share what we're doing in Zaragoza. With your permission, I'd like to use the opportunity to tell you how in Zaragoza we're promoting sustainable mobility thanks to the use of technology and also thinking about how people can improve their quality of life. This has been talked about this morning at the presentation given at the opening ceremony. And if it's inspiring and helps other cities to use it as a reference, well, we'll have achieved our goal. So how can technology help regarding the management of mobility? Okay, well, technology is essential because in order to advance towards sustainable mobility, we need to be able to use data, all the data that we collect and that we optimize and compile about our city. Recently, we've changed the traffic control center to have sensors which at the end of the day are what will collect all the data and will enable us to understand how we can optimize and improve that traffic management and mobility to then be able to apply new measures and policies that will help us facilitate everyday life of everyone and optimize resources depending on demand and on the users. These options are feasible thanks to the fact that we can collect not only the data through municipal management, through our traffic control center, but also thanks to new applications such as what you can see on the screen, which is a pilot project that we currently have in Zaragoza, consisting of, thanks to the use of phones, we can be able to offer all types of movement and have all the available modes of transport available for citizens. We can optimize everything to do with the movements of public transport. But not only that, but also we also integrate all the shared mobility of users and all the journeys made by taxi and all other forms of transport we have within Zaragoza. What that allows us to do is to collect all the information from the users themselves, and then we have the information we have on the city, and we have a comprehensive control center where we can improve the use of public transport, the use of shared mobility, and for me that's the best way to avoid the use of private transport. We're all looking for solutions to decarbonize cities, to improve sustainable mobility, but I defend addressing sustainable mobility through the convenience and comfort for citizens themselves. I don't want to impose measures that prohibit or make life more complicated for them. At the end of the day, we have to offer ease of use. So having an application that enables us to integrate and seek the alternatives for mobility we can have within the city, depending on different criteria, but we can also book journeys, and very comfortably we will be able to leave our vehicle at home, and we in the council we can have information and data on how in real time how the mobility is happening in our city to then establish different patterns and to be able to influence it to the extent that is necessary. In future, we won't only be working on land-based mobility, but we also have to think a bit beyond that. And then that's where air mobility comes in. In cities and urban environments, this will also be the next step, which we are already working on in Zaragoza. We have in the fire brigade unit for safety, we have a unit in the fire brigade service with 18 trained people who are on active service 365, 24 hours a day. Right now, for instance, during these festivities, they're controlling crowds, controlling staff, but also life-saving situations and complex situations. And also we can identify where we might have concentrations of young people or pedestrians. So airborne mobility also has to be thought about, and we have to look at what uses we can give it within the urban environment. That's why we've also established in Zaragoza a space which is the first space at European level for urban air-based mobility, to be able to make it possible to carry out all the tests that will give us the licenses and learn about all the patterns regarding the use, the distribution of goods. These are the first uses that we're working on in the urban environment, so that that can become a reality that we can start to see in our cities or in all cities. We're seeing how these goods are distributed thanks to drones. So first we need to carry out tests, we need legislation, and we have to establish what criteria we can act with. And that's what this is happening in Zaragoza. We're working with a consortium, a European consortium, H 2020 with 14 other European cities, where we're establishing all that innovation, which isn't the current step, which is a subsequent step, where we'll be able to interact with each other. And it's another example of how technology, which we currently have, can be used to improve mobility in cities. But if we're talking about a future, what we're doing right now is facilitating that new working environment and learning how this regulation can come about. We're also talking about a more imminent present time. And here, for example, this is one of the organizers of the event. So we're working to be able to transport the public transport fleets and make all our buses, public bus services, electric. Specifically, they're going to be this model by the Irizar car maker, a Basque company, which has a very modern line of buses. This is possible thanks to technological advances. It's a significant commitment because we're transforming 25% of the fleet, which will be ready next year, and it will be electric. And then we'll over the next, we'll have new additions after that, and that will enable us to have that decarbonization of cities, but also that better quality of life, and above all, a significant change which I think is necessary to advance towards that use of sustainable mobility and that rational use of public transport, which is that public transport has an image of modernity and that it's used by young people and by all citizens of the city, not because they have no alternative, but because it's the best alternative that they can have, the most competitive, the most modern, the most practical, the most economic, and of course the most sustainable. So that's why we're carrying out this ambitious project, which next year will enable us to have 20-25% of the fleets to be electric in our public transport. But technology has also helped us to improve, in these complicated times, the quality of air. And we have included CO2 meters in all buses and trams in our public transport to make sure that the quality of air is optimal. And on the other hand, changing all the air filters in public transport. That's another use of technology, this time to provide air quality in public transport. But public transport, which is a great commitment of cities, and in Zaragoza we want it to be the core commitment. 20% of daily journeys are done on public transport. We want this percentage to be even higher. But it also has to be accessible. So another measure that we have implemented, or we're currently implementing, and is also related to technology, that's why I'm bringing it to this presentation, and it's to make our public transport be accessible thanks to technology. In this case, it's a technology which enables anyone with reduced mobility or blind people. It provides them all the information in real time thanks to they can do so from their mobile phone, and it will tell them how they can move around, and it makes their life easier and more accessible. Of course, in addition to having there are all kinds of platforms, ramps, but we thought it was also important to give them this autonomy for groups of people who are probably, we want to offer them greater ease to use public transport. And of course, technology is fundamental to help us with the prioritization of traffic lights in Zaragoza. We initially, when we brought the tram line, it's a north-south line. It was an internal development by the technicians, but this enabled us to optimize the time and the commercial speed of public transport and minimize waiting times for vehicles. If public transport is important, I wanted to dedicate a few minutes to it. But in order to make Zaragoza, in order to have charging points to facilitate that transition towards the electric vehicle, no less important is this. And that's why we are also currently putting out a tender to have at least 36 charging points distributed throughout the city so that all electric vehicles can charge themselves through an administrative concession. So that will enable us to improve things for people. Cycling mobility doesn't have so much to do with technology, but it's a big commitment by the city. We are continuing to increase the number of cycling lanes, making a more peaceful city. We're not an example like Bilbao, whose whole city center has a 30-kilometer-per-hour speed limit. We're not so ambitious, but for now, over 50% of our roads have already been limited. That happened before the statewide regulation, but during the confinement, our way to address that rapid development of sustainable mobility and active mobility was thanks to bicycle lanes. We're working to raise awareness among all our citizens for coexistence. I think that's what summarizes our approach to mobility. It's coexistence and respect for each other. We're continuing to advance with that. We have already 80 kilometers, but it's been very widely accepted, and it's the fastest way for citizens to be 100% available for traveling by bicycle. It's the easiest way to coexist among us all. For that, we need infrastructures throughout the city, and for that, we have created a series of bicycle parking areas and scooter parking areas in the city, and also thanks to technology, we can make them safe and monitored, which is very important. We have this throughout the city and at different points. This allows us to continue making progress in different uses of more sustainable mobility that's more decarbonized, but with a view for the future, which is why we're working on thinking about mobility, not now, not the day after tomorrow, but a bit further in the future. Just like I was talking earlier about drones, we're also working to be able to offer Zaragoza and cities progress towards connected and autonomous mobility. That's why we're working at national level with Biro, Barcelona, and other cities, where we will create laboratories, and we're working to create laboratories that can study that connected mobility and carry out those tests so that we can then bring them out into a real environment and leave the laboratory. There, we're working with the Ministry of Industry too, and with different stakeholders at national level. We have an important network, and Zaragoza will have its own lab, this mobility lab, connected mobility lab, which will enable us to work and explore, just like we're doing with airborne mobility, and looking at what mobility has to look like in the future. All these advances that I tried to summarize are possible thanks to the use of technology applied to mobility to create a more efficient, sustainable, and at the same time more economical mobility for everyone. So with that, I hope I've kept to my time. Thank you very much.
Bueno, sin duda, Natalia.
Well, without a doubt, Natalia and her experience in Zaragoza has been very interesting. Now we're going to move on to Milagros Tolón, the mayor of Toledo, who will probably have contributions to share, and why not, things that can be replicated in other cities. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'd like to congratulate the City Council of Bilbao, and in particular, Alfonso Gil, who is also the chairman of the Mobility Consortium, and, of course, Petronor for making it possible, and also Repsol. Before starting this morning, I was being asked that as a mayor of a historical city which has nothing to do with Bilbao, Zaragoza. What did these types of congresses mean, these professional meetings? And I said, well, we are focusing on two matters. First of all, we're here to learn. And secondly, we're here to put into practice and to launch everything that's already been done in other places, and of course, to help try to make cities, in this case, who have not reached this level of sustainability, to help them be capable of achieving goals, which is healthy mobility. I want to start by saying that municipal governments during this year and a half, well, we've had a relevant role. We've had a very significant role in the management of this pandemic, which I think has made it possible that nobody here doubts the relevant role that city councils have had. Natalia explained this well. And of course, all those of us who are in municipal politics know this. And I believe, and I feel this because we've experienced it, that now is the time to address those changes in a firm way, without delays, with a roadmap. We need a roadmap, and we need a model of city. Because if we don't have a model of city, what can happen is that all the challenges and new technologies at the service of mobility will fall behind. So we need a roadmap as a framework for the policies that we're going to carry out within the 2030 agenda, which I think we all keep in mind. What's most important is achieving this model of city, and above all, to improve its essence. The city of Toledo isn't the same as Madrid, but it also needs to have its own distinguishing traits. And this entire framework we have is what has to be applied. All these issues that we think that are very important. For us in the city of Toledo, what's most important, apart from having a model of city, is participation. Carrying out community participative processes with citizens, and within civil society we have the business fabric, the trade unions. What's civil society? To be able to do it all together. And in this process in cities, we're going to be in charge of carrying out all these measures in each neighborhood and district, very different districts. And I'm going to give you an example of the city I represent. We're going to have to take this model to each neighborhood, each street, and above all, to each citizen. I heard it this morning. It's not that we're going against cars, not at all. Above all, we're going to protect and facilitate and make more healthy the lives of the citizens in our urban environments. So therefore, the application of new technologies isn't anything new in Toledo. In Toledo, for years we've been advancing towards a sustainable model, and now we want to move on to our challenge, which is a healthy model. And I want to use this opportunity to say that the technologies that we're using in a cross-cutting way in all departments of the City Council are not only important for mobility, but also for the whole management of municipal policies in the city. Toledo is a World Heritage City, certified as such in 1986 by the UNESCO. This means a great responsibility because you have to manage your city, not only for your citizens, but also for the world. And above all, to be able to preserve all our heritage and the historical core of our city. Toledo has 86,000 inhabitants. Its metropolitan area is 150,000. We have a distance from one end to the other of 20 kilometers. Those of us who manage it know perfectly well what this means. A significant amount of expenditure to reinforce our public services. The historical court of Toledo has 120 places of cultural interest which we have to protect. But what's also very important is that the historical quarter of Toledo, which is the largest in Spain and the second largest in the world after Rome, we want it to be a living area. We want it to be a don't want it to be a museum, that for citizens to use it, where citizens can move around, and above all, somewhere that at 8 in the evening doesn't become a museum. So what have we done? What are we doing during these years? For us, digitalization has been essential. We've advanced towards pedestrianization, and I can say that when I reached the government, I found around the Toledo Cathedral, I found cars parked all around it. This was the image. You didn't really question it. You saw Toledo Cathedral, and there were car parks all around it. We gradually gained ground. The pedestrian gained ground over the car. There was a lot of opposition, but the concept is changing. 6 years ago, this concept didn't exist. What the pandemic has done has forced us to just suddenly jump up 3 steps. So what we did with digitalization was advance towards a progressive pedestrianization of one neighborhood, the old neighborhood, which is the most complicated, with the installation of bollards, retractable bollards. We have 16 at each entrance, which only allowed access for residents, because we want to facilitate the life of our citizens in this area through this number plates recognition software. Unless you go to a car park or a controlled area, in this area, only residents can enter. Bear in mind that Toledo is a medieval city, a walled city. It was a city prepared for its defense, so accessibility and mobility is more complicated. As I say, these entrances, this entrance monitoring with number plates allows us to restrict entrance to vehicles to those that are essential to guarantee access to homes and also to businesses and to provide services. The time management has been essential, particularly the regulation through an ordinance, so that we can also control the number of cars and, above all, with management of the numbers. And I'll explain what this means, apart from the times. In the city of Toledo, the historic quarter of the city, there are less problems, but I'll explain this later on. What we do is surround it with 3 rings to manage the numbers with public car parks. The first ring is in the historic quarter, and through a control system, when we see that the first ring is full, we move on to the next phase, where we talk about penalty parking, and when that's full, we go to the third phase with public transport. The city's public transport is basic, and increasingly we're trying to gain ground. We're trying to win this battle over private vehicles, because for traffic management, to make it effective, it's fundamental to have updated and real-time information. People need to know where the bus is, how long it will take to arrive, and how full it is in Toledo, as in other cities. For this, we have a network of cameras which allow us to know what's happening at each moment and to make decisions to improve traffic flows. These cameras that we have are not just for the police. Any citizen can know on our website what the state of traffic is at each point of the city of Toledo. So that's why we talk so much about the importance of participation. In particular, not only when searching for solutions, but also when integrating it in the city and being accomplices in these decisions with information and images that are available for everyone. But another significant jump that we've made in recent years has been in public transport, which, as we have said, is vital. it's essential for municipal management with a whole range of possibilities, among them to introduce new technologies, thus improving its performance in order to reduce the dependency on private vehicles among our citizens. Every week, Toledo's buses travel a distance of almost twice around the world. This is a significant figure, above all because of the number of kilometers covered and the number of buses we have, as I say, to facilitate transport between neighborhoods. 19 kilometers from one neighborhood to the other, 58,000 vehicles but on any workday, we register the entrance of 570,000 vehicles to the city. This is totally unsustainable. This can't be. So that's why we're working so that we can reinforce and improve our public transport, which for us is vital. This type of information that we have provided by new technologies wouldn't be useful if the user could not enjoy its benefits, and that's the goal of the entire strategy we have, which is innovation at the service of citizens. Passengers also reap the benefits with mobile applications, which include all the information on the stops, the times, distances, the waiting times, about everything that a citizen may be interested in who wants to go from one place to another, to work or whatever, and to schedule their journeys. And another of the issues we're working on for healthy and sustainable mobility is the incorporation of low emissions vehicles, which for us is essential, particularly the municipal fleet of vehicles. And in this sense, we've replaced our fleet of urban buses, which were diesel-powered, for more modern and less contaminant vehicles, such as natural gas. In 2023, we're also going to have electric buses. But what has also been important to encourage mobility. This has to be cross-cutting, as I say, but it's not only transport. For example, what's been very important is the electronic administration. Very important for citizens, because this, of course, has an impact on mobility, and the broader the range of services that we can offer online for citizens, fewer journeys they will have to do, saving time and also reducing our carbon footprint. In the historic quarter, there's been a turning point because at last, Toledo's historic quarter, which is World Heritage, it has 90% of optic fiber. It's cost a lot of money and work through a European program, with an important program that we've also done with Movistar, the phone carrier. But at last, the historic quarter has optic fiber with a twofold objective. First, for the citizen, and also to promote employment, and so that this online work can be carried out in a historic area, which a few years ago it was unthinkable that there could be small companies that deal with high technology. But I can assure you that the most important tool that all city councils need to advance towards healthy and sustainable mobility, sustainable, we were already full in that is, but what's very important is urban planning, and this is vital. For city councils, this is essential. The urban plans that we're carrying out in Toledo must focus on the citizen. 20 years ago, this was unthinkable. The municipal urban planning of Toledo, which, by the way, was cancelled 2 years ago, and luckily, it didn't contemplate more healthier mobility, the floodable areas, nor the optimization of resources. Now it does. Now it does because there's been a significant change, not just in trends, but also in awareness raising. And cities here have a lot to say. So therefore, urban plans must always focus on the citizen and on the pedestrian as the focus of mobility. That doesn't mean we're against cars and, above all, of services and infrastructures. We have to advance towards a model where everything is closer. I think that this is the goal we all have. And we've seen this throughout the pandemic. We need everything to be closer, reducing to the minimum the journey times, and that they can take place on foot. So what are we doing in Toledo? We're carrying out a bicycle lane going around the city using the bank of the river Tajo, which has been very affected by the recent floods. But it doesn't only have to be used for leisure, but we want citizens to use bicycle lanes to go to work or to do their business in any of the neighborhoods. So that's why we're building this circular bicycle lane. For us, our main monument, natural monument, is our river Tajo. And I'll end with this. Well, I have a few things, but very important. Digitalization also of industrial areas, and something which for Toledo is very important and which has a lot to do with what very important to a tourist city is an analysis of tourists and their behavior and a tourist sustainability plan where we know where the tourist flows are coming from in order to have a more sustainable city. And I'll end with this. Cities are vital for our future, as indicated, and cities have cultural qualities, architectural qualities, and above all, they have exceptional possibilities to carry out this change of model, which is already taking place in Spain and in Europe. Thank you very much.
Well, sometimes time can be short and we may want to know a little more, but we need to continue with the other speakers we have here in SUM Bilbao. So we're going to invite Jon Leque Martinez, who, as I have already mentioned, he's the president of Autonervión. So you have 10 minutes, Jon. Well, first of all, I want to thank SUM Bilbao for this invitation. This is such a great and well-organized Congress. And thank you for giving us the chance to share our perspective on mobility from our company. First of all, I'd like to give you some figures. The first association is made of 25 companies. And Marcela couldn't mention, but I'm also a territory councillor of Aconauto, which is the leader of all the car dealerships in Spain. For which more than 3,000 companies work, and we carry on more than 160,000 direct employments. So what is the future perspective? We have no doubt that the society is demanding a more and more sustainable mobility. I'm going to stop at the sustainable mobility topic and say that it doesn't only mean only an electric mobility, because nowadays we have other alternative energy that are equally valid, like biofuels or hydrogen, among others. If we want to continue being the leaders of the car business. We need to support on intelligent systems that provide a safe connection, digital as well as physical, and to promote innovative techniques for that. So to give you an overall idea of what it's going to mean, the whole mobility market, the international market will grow 60% from here to 2025. And due to this demand for a sustainable mobility, the compromise of the automobile business is to reach the zero emissions from here to 2050. So I want to emphasize this with a couple of examples. If we use 100% electric vehicle nowadays, the emissions will be zero. But since the mix energetic in Spain in renewable is lower than the rest, we wouldn't be in zero emissions. And opposite, if we use a combustion vehicle today and we fill in at a gas station that has eco-fuel, which is a reality, this vehicle will create emissions, but in the global cycle, it will be a net result. But if we speak of new technologies, from our point of view, it means evolving from the traditional commercialization of cars to a green digital business. To carry out such evolution, we need to have the support of artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, of the computation of. So here we have 3 examples, as it is the payment by use, the smart charges by the development of new technologies, of a vehicle that is connected to the recharging point and allows the charge to carry out with an optimal cost, or the optimization of mobility transits, facilitating the access of vehicles between cities. We will make it possible, several of these things that I am mentioning here, so that consumers can choose the best transport system, so that public authorities implement these models for mobility, for events, etc. And so citizens can plan in a better way the use of the terrain, of the area. As well as this, we will help to solve the 3 great challenges, such as the gap between the use and the cost. Some users pay 10 but use 8. The loss of the active stakeholders. So what makes a vehicle to have less value after the few first years? And then the third one is the topic of emissions. Regarding this one, we need to highlight that in Europe, the industry of car dealing makes the 15% of CO2 emissions, and our compromise is to reach the 0% emissions from here to 2050. And I would like to mention in favor of the automobile, because I've heard some arguments against, because it seems like so far the measures that have been discussed are getting rid of cars. And I would like to say that the CO2 emissions that are created in Spain nowadays are only 27%. The rest belongs to other types of transport, like maritime transport, among others. And to finish, because I wanted to make this very briefly, I wanted to highlight a reality of an innovation we have made among the big car dealerships in Spain. Today it's a reality. Is the greatest marketplace of the VO, is the occasion vehicle, that means second-hand cars, that it is currently, this platform is the one that holds the greatest stock of second-hand cars. But the challenge is to step onto this challenge of new technologies and mobility. In the next years, it will be the first platform of digital mobility. It will be interconnected, it will have multiple channels, and it will aim to give response to our clients. Clients who want to buy a vehicle or rent a vehicle, or they want to subscribe, or because they want to consume music on it by Spotify or Netflix, etc., etc. And to finish, just wanted to mention that the car leaderships, we will keep accompanying our clients, working on all new services in the circular economy, in safety. Thank you very much.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Jon. He did leave some topic to discuss, so thank you for this time. Let's see if we can have a dialogue before the closing. We're going to invite now the Javier Aguirre, the CEO of Capsch Traficom in Spain and Portugal since 2013. And I'm not going to talk about the extensive curriculum he has so that we don't waste any time. So thank you. Well, thank you about the calling me engineer, because sometimes we forget about that. I wanted to connect with what Milagros and Natalia said before, that in the end, it is very useful for me to explain what I had ready. So it seemed like we were coordinated. Well, in reality, everything has changed. To me, this is reality. It has changed because of this. Don't think about it anymore. We started with cell phones, and this changed our life. The cell phone, we have the plan of the city. It's even a translator. We can connect with our family members, with the company. The cell phone is allowing us to be connected constantly. And which is also enabling us to talk about this new mobility. We are in a new world. We need to wonder whether we are ready for this. But it's clear that we are in a new world. It may look like a little catastrophic world, but I will say it's a new and better world. Are we ready for this? I think we are. We need to ask whether somehow, if someone is guaranteeing the mobility as a right of the citizen, as well as a general good, a common good. We should be asking this. I'm not going to say who we should ask to, but well, in all this topic about strategies, tendencies, trends, I think 3 of them have been mentioned, very important ones. 50% of cars that are being sold and we're buying are already connected. That is a reality. We need to see, on the other hand, whether those vehicles need to be connected to something else. Well, the road, I don't know if it's very connected, but there is also reality that there are third parties that are making influence on people. I mean, digital platforms that have an influencing power that is quite great. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before WhatsApp dropped, and it was like a world crisis. So it does have a greater influence. So at the end, as we have already seen, the figures are essential. Is the analysis of the figures. It's not just the figures. These are trends that are somehow showing these activities and this reality. To me, this is the scenario in which we are moving right now. We have an infrastructure we have this infrastructure, and it's somehow, I think it's changing. There is a traditional management of the infrastructure that is indeed changing, and we believe it needs to change even more. But besides, we have all those stakeholders, factors that are making an influence on people, much more than what we think they are. And all that, we have a cloud over there that should interconnect these two worlds, the traditional one, and I don't know to say the new world or the new era. And from there, let's see if in the next minutes we can identify who we think needs to lead that connection and that change, because this is, at the end of the day, a change, going from one model, from the traditional one, to the new one. And within that new one, it's in an in-between point right now. These are pictures that a friend of mine took, a colleague. Those are tracks that got stuck there in the mountain in Ezcaray. And we believe on GPS navigators so much that we go wherever they send us. We don't think about it. And this is a problem, because if we don't think, I always say we need to spend some time thinking, because if we are following the navigator and we go wherever it says we should go, that's what happens. This is an artist from Berlin, Simon something, who had a performance in Berlin. He took a trolley with 99 cell phones and he started moving around, and he suddenly Google went crazy and started changing the information. So it was an evidence of that information can also be changed. So we need to be aware that any information we are given can be true or not, as we experienced during the pandemic when we received so many messages. So we were receiving lies all the time. Well, this is the new mobility. The scooter is becoming an interesting alternative to move around. And the autonomous car is also a reality. Because the other day a friend of mine told me that his boss bought a Tesla and they went from here to Barcelona, and the car went on autonomous mode, literally. So you can program the stops so that the car stops at certain points, and that's it. So this is another reality. It's a new world. We who are a little older, we have this image of the big runner where the cars flew, but the vision was quite modern. So we have here what we see as the future of the traffic management. We have 5 scenarios. We have the figures, the data hub, some experts say. We have well-organized data. We have the vehicles that are connected. We have the automobile industry, which is becoming more and more important. Because before the vehicle, the car leadership would sell a car, but it didn't interact the car, only when for the car maintenance. But nowadays there are other tools that enable them to follow the client on an everyday basis. And then we have the new technologies, the age of computing, which is hardware processing and all the artificial intelligence topic. So I wanted the roadmap. I wanted to focus on the roadmap, the intelligent mobility. And this is the way we should be moving. And this is our vision. As I said at the beginning, we have the traffic systems, all that traditional management that has focused on managing the infrastructure with the traffic agencies, city councils mostly, and then other agencies like the DGT in Spain or the one in the Basque government. They manage the infrastructures, and they focused on if the traffic increased, they will build more roads. And that was the management of the demand. We need to keep creating infrastructures. We will have to build some, but Spain is already well doubted with infrastructures. Now we need to manage the demand. For example, like in the case of Toledo, if 500,000 cars enter a city every day, that is crazy, that it's a problem. So we need to see whether all those vehicles enter the city at the same time, what the pollution rate will be. So we need to manage that demand. We need to convince the driver not to enter the city on rush hours. That with the flexibility of teleworking that we have nowadays, for example, that will be a proposal asking the driver to stay home and not to drive at certain times of the day. Or even encouraging the traveler to use public transport. And why should we do this? Because at the end of the day, we will always have the car. We will never get rid of it. It's true that maybe before we will use the car more often, and now we need to use it less and less. But it will always be there. So from the management of traffic, we go to the management of demand, and we can take advantage of new technologies of big data. And finally, we should talk about the new ecosystems and the connected vehicle, which is other type of policies to help in that mobility. And to conclude, to me, that cloud that we saw before is to connect that digitalized and this traditional world. I think the public administration has a relevant role because, first, within its mission is to protect the citizens. The administration is there to make our lives better. That's what they try to do. Sometimes they manage and sometimes they make mistakes, as we all do. So what does the administration need to do? To coordinate, which already does. And that is important because at the end, all those companies that are up there in that third slide, they're looking at their business, obviously. They will seek solutions for the citizens, but at the end of the day, it's a private company, and we are here to make money. That is the reality. The administration has a common good, which is ours. And we need to believe in that, and they need to coordinate, because if they don't coordinate, nobody does. But they also need to lead. They have the means, they have the knowledge, and they need to lead all this change, because as I mentioned at the beginning, everything has changed and we are in a new world. This mobility, the new one that we call, needs something different. And what we need is probably for the administration to start taking this essential role. And in that process, we need to be connected. The phone changed our life, and the phone is the way to connect, is the way to make this work. It's a terribly complex, but at the same time simple system, because we carry it in our pocket, and it's incredible how many things we can do with that. If we go back 20 years, maybe 15, I still remember if I wasn't at the office, nobody could get rid of you. So where were you? People will ask me. So I was at home, but we couldn't get a hold of you. So, and nowadays, some people complain we're always connected. Yeah, but whenever I receive a call, I can take it. So I think the administration needs to ease this change. We are in a new process, and I believe we are ready. And I think the administration is ready as well. Thank you very much.
Bueno.
As I told you, just to conclude this panel, I wanted to thank for these speakers we've had, which has been a luxury. Unfortunately, we have no time. The mayoress needs to leave, but Natalia, Jose, and John can stay unavailable. That now, if you have any questions, you may ask. Or also in the APP of the Congress, there is one section to make questions to the speakers. On my end, I come from a faraway place representing a net of more than 360 cities called Marco Ciudades. And in these 360 cities, one of the topics in our agenda has to do with sustainable urban mobility and the articulation, because it seems like we talk about the urban and we forget about the rural, but there is also a very important field there, above all in countries like ours, because the rural mobility is also very important. And all the ideas shared today were very interesting for us, and we envy some of them. But to add something in this closing, like the mayoress and Natalia mentioned and talked about focusing on people, and also the mayor of Bilbao, he mentioned the same topic. So I want to congratulate you, because you are all focusing on the people. Sometimes we may think they are more advanced than us, but with this aim of the 2030 agenda of prosperity, alliances, and safety in the world, we should be working on those goals. So in each participation from the public administration, from the City Council of Zaragoza or even Toledo, so beyond the central role of public administration. The slogan of Marco Ciudades this year is there is no development that can be possible without thinking in the associate management. So the participation of the citizens is essential, as well as the company's participation, the unions, the financing sectors, because only the public administration on its own won't be able to do it, and neither the private sector or any other. So that's why we believe that beyond that coordination role, as you, Jose, mentioned, the way to move forward and improve is working together. So it's been a pleasure sharing this panel with you. So we open this space for questions of the use of the web of the Congress. Thank you very much.